There is a painting, oil on canvas board, primary colours, red, white, blue, a clown grinning, wide eyes, a wig the colour of a fire hydrant, the kind of painting you might find at a school fundraiser, cheerful, a little amateurish. You might even like it. When you look at a human face, your brain does something automatic. In less than 1/5 of a second, it reads micro-expressions, the muscles around the eyes, the corners of the mouth, the brow. It calculates emotion. It calculates intent. It decides safe or not safe. This painting gives you nothing. The smile is fixed. The eyes don't move. There's no person here to read, only a surface. Your brain reaches for data and finds only paint. The painting is signed in the lower left corner. J.W. Gacy. 1985, Death Row, Stateville Correctional Center, Illinois. He painted it 9 years after his last murder. 3 years before his lawyers would argue in open court that the man who painted it did not exist, that the killings had been committed by someone else entirely, someone he called Jack. This is a documentary about a mask, not the one made of grease paint. The other kind. Who built Pogo? In late 1975, a man in a Chicago suburb joined a local charity clown club called the Jolly Jokers. Most members adopted a costume from a shared catalogue and left it at that. This man designed everything himself: the grease paint, the wig, the costumes. He created 2 distinct characters with distinct personalities, and he named them. Pogo, a happy clown. Patches, more serious. He performed at children's hospitals, charity drives, Democratic Party events, parades. He rarely charged for his time. Other clowns in his club told him his painted smile was too sharp, too angular, that it made children uncomfortable. He kept it. He later explained why clowning appealed to him. It allowed him, he said, to regress into childhood. And when he was in costume, something else became available to him that wasn't available otherwise. The man. His name was John Wayne Gacy, born in Chicago in 1942, raised in a working-class household by an alcoholic father who beat him and told him he was worthless, and whom Gacy spent his entire life trying to impress. By his 30s, he had built something his father never had. He owned a ranch house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township, bought with help from his mother. He started a contracting company called PDM. Most of his workforce was teenagers and young men he recruited himself, boys who needed the work and trusted the man offering it. From 1974, every summer, he threw a party. Each one had a theme. The backyard filled with up to 400 people. Neighbours, Democratic Party officials, business associates. He was the kind of host who made sure no one's glass was empty. He ploughed snow from his neighbours' sidewalks free of charge. He loaned his construction tools to anyone who asked. He was appointed to the Norwood Park Township Street Lighting Committee. He became precinct captain of his Democratic Party district. In 1975, he was made director of Chicago's annual Polish Constitution Day Parade, a role he would hold until the year of his arrest. The contractor, the politician, the clown, and the record nobody had thought to mention at the parties. The record. In 1968, Gacy was convicted of the sodomy of a teenage boy in Waterloo, Iowa, sentenced to 10 years. Psychiatrists at the University of Iowa evaluated him. Their finding: antisocial personality disorder. Treatment unlikely to help. Behavior pattern likely to result in repeated conflict. He was released on parole after 18 months. Within 4 years, the murders had begun. The Jolly Joker Clown Club was founded the same year his killing reached its highest rate. He designed Pogo's sharp smile while he was averaging a murder every few weeks. The boys he employed at PDM were the same age as the boys he was bringing home. The costume was not a break from what he was doing. It was part of it. The Uncanny Valley. In 1970, a Japanese roboticist named Masahiro Mori made an observation. As robots became more human in appearance, people found them increasingly appealing, up to a point. Then something shifted. At a certain threshold of near-human resemblance, the feeling inverted. People found them unsettling, repellent. He called it the Uncanny Valley, the gap between almost human and actually human, where familiarity and wrongness collide in the same object. Clown makeup lives in that gap. The face is human enough to register as a face, but the distortion, the fixed grin, the painted-on eyes, the absence of any expression that changes, makes it impossible to process as a person. Your brain reaches for the data it uses to evaluate every human it meets, and finds nothing. In the absence of readable emotion, the brain does not relax. It escalates to threat. A 2023 study surveyed over 500 people across 64 countries on the origins of clown fear. They found 4 main contributors. Unexpectedly, the strongest single predictor was not traumatic experience, not horror films, not unusual physical appearance. It was what the researchers called hidden emotional signals, the inability to read what the person behind the makeup is actually feeling. Not the face, the unreadability of the face. Neuroscientist Robert Provine spent his career studying laughter and facial expression as social signals, the data we use, moment to moment, to assess the intentions of everyone around us. When those signals are masked or falsified, he wrote, we lose trust in the person behind the mask, and that distrust escalates quickly. Your brain evolved to solve faces. It is extraordinarily good at this. In less than 200 milliseconds, it can distinguish genuine happiness from performed happiness. It can read the micro-expressions that flicker across a face before the conscious mind suppresses them. Clown makeup switches all of that off. Gacy knew this, not from research papers, from practice. He was told his smile was wrong. He kept it, because the wrongness was operational. Your discomfort, right now, thinking about a man in a clown costume, that is not phobia. That is your threat detection system, working exactly as designed, registering exactly the signal it was built to register. He built his costume around that signal. He performed inside it for years. And the people around him, the hospital patients, the parade spectators, the neighbors who waved at Pogo from across the street, overrode their own signal, because the context said, this is a clown, and clowns are safe. It says so in the costume. The archetype. Clowns have always occupied a specific position in human culture. Medieval jesters performed social transgressions that no one else was licensed to attempt, mocking the king, breaking ceremony, saying the unsayable, Their permission to transgress was institutionalized. It was encoded in the costume. The mask was the disclaimer. By the mid-20th century, that history had been smoothed over. Bozo, Clarabelle, Ronald McDonald. Clowns had been domesticated, made safe, made commercial, made harmless. The cultural memory of what the mask originally meant had faded from mainstream consciousness. Then, in December 1978, police searched a crawl space beneath a house in Norridge, Illinois. The media needed a way to describe what they had found. They reached for the most striking fact available. The man who lived there dressed as a clown for children's parties. The Killer Clown. The name wrote itself. Stephen King had been developing a novel about a predatory entity that takes the form of a clown since the late 1970s. It was published in 1986. Pennywise arrived into a culture that Gacy had already prepared. A culture that had, in the 8 years since his arrest, been quietly rewiring its relationship to clowns. The modern evil clown archetype, Pennywise, the Joker reframed as horror, the creepy clown that fills Halloween costume stores every year, did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged from the collision between what clowns were supposed to be and what one man in Illinois had demonstrated they could conceal. Joseph Derwin, who researches the evil clown as a cultural phenomenon at California State University, argues that it now operates independently of phobia. It has its own gravity, its own logic. The fear no longer needs a specific clown to attach to. It attaches to the idea of the clown. In the autumn of 2016, reports spread across dozens of American states. Anonymous figures in clown costumes appearing near schools, attempting to lure children. Reports came from police departments, from schools, from parents. The panic was real, documented, measurable. The clowns were mostly not there. In most cases, no perpetrators were identified, no crimes were verified. The panic was not caused by actual clowns. It was caused by the idea of clowns, an idea so thoroughly saturated with threat that the image alone was sufficient to produce a national fear response. Gacy died in 1994. He is still operating. The Four Johns. In the year before his trial, Gacy spent over 300 hours undergoing psychiatric evaluation. His lawyers were building an insanity defense. 3 defense psychiatrists would testify he was a paranoid schizophrenic with multiple personalities. A Jekyll and Hyde, a man not responsible for what he could not control. But Gacy had already told evaluators his own theory. He had, he said, 4 distinct personalities. John the contractor, the successful businessman, employer of dozens, annual revenues over $200,000. John the politician, the party precinct captain, the community organizer, the man photographed with the First Lady, Pogo the clown, the children's entertainer, the charity volunteer, the man everyone liked, and a 4th, a man named Jack Hanley, who Gacy said had done all the killing. Jack who despised his own desires. Jack who viewed his victims as weak and stupid and disposable. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and found him guilty on all 33 counts. Multiple personality disorder, genuine dissociation, involves amnesia between states. The person in one identity genuinely cannot access what happened in another. Gacy had no such amnesia. He remembered everything. He kept meticulous records of his victims' movements. He planned ahead, documented, organized. His crawl space was a filing system. Forensic psychologists who have reviewed Gacy's case assess his PCLR score, the standard clinical measure of psychopathic traits, at 27, above average for criminal populations, below the formal clinical threshold for psychopathy. The system had a tool, used it, got a result. Concerning, but not psychopathic, and released him. The Four Johns was not a symptom of a fragmented mind. It was a legal narrative, designed before his lawyers asked for it, a story constructed with the same meticulous precision he brought to everything else. Pogo was not an alter ego. Pogo was a department. Jack Hanley was an exit. After his execution in 1994, forensic psychiatrist Helen Morrison, who had interviewed Gacy extensively over many years, arranged for his brain to be examined. She was looking for something that would make him legible, a structural anomaly, an architecture of violence. There was nothing, neurologically, structurally, a normal brain. She later said that after all those interviews, across all those years, she still did not fully understand him. That is the most honest statement in the entire case file. The art. In 1982, on Illinois' death row at Menard Correctional Center, Gacy acquired a box of paints. He would produce over 2,000 works before his execution 12 years later. Oil on canvas board, each piece signed, many numbered in sequence. The subjects he returned to, again and again: Pogo, patches, skulls, the Seven Dwarfs, Elvis Presley, Jesus Christ, John Dillinger, Fred Flintstone, Disney characters, his own face in grease paint. And his house. He painted the house on Summerdale Avenue, the ranch house at 8213 West Summerdale, the one with the crawl space where he had buried 26 people beneath the floor. He signed it. He sold it. The painting sold for $175,000. Look at what he chose. Pogo, the face he showed the world. Skulls. He had arranged the dead for years beneath his own bedroom. Disney characters, the language of childhood, the entertainment of children. Jesus, a moral claim made from death row, in oil paint, signed with his full name. Dillinger, the outlaw as American folk hero. This is not what a fragmented mind produces. This is a legacy assembled one canvas at a time, by a man who numbered his paintings like an edition. He began selling the paintings with the help of his lawyer before his execution. Illinois sued him in 1993 to prevent him from profiting. He was executed in May 1994. The auction of his work was held the same year, shortly after. The state stopped him from cashing the checks. It did not stop the paintings from entering the world. Curators who later exhibited his work described the paintings as art brut, a term for work made outside the formal art establishment, often by the institutionalized, framed as raw expression of the unmediated psyche, authentic because unschooled. Gacy was not unmediated. He was one of the most controlled, most deliberate people in this case record. Every grave was in a precise location. Every victim was logged. He designed his own costumes and named his own characters. The paintings were made with the same intent. The market. Before his arrest, John Wayne Gacy's paintings sold for less than $250. After his execution, after the documentaries, the podcasts, the streaming series, Authenticated pieces have sold at major auction houses for $6,000, for $10,000, for $12,800. One painting of his house, the house where he buried 29 people beneath the floor, sold for $175,000. The murders made the paintings worth something. It was precisely the murders. The trade has a name: murderabilia. Artifacts connected to violent crime. Letters, drawings, personal effects, court documents, dirt from a crawl space. It emerged as a formal market in 1998. When eBay banned it in 2001, specialist platforms moved in. At any given moment, thousands of items are listed. There are authentication protocols, provenance chains, price indices. The full architecture of a legitimate collectibles market applied to the output of people who killed. Those collectors who have spoken describe their motivations differently: historical interest, psychological curiosity. One dealer said it more plainly. For many buyers, these paintings feel dangerous. They deliver proximity to something that cannot otherwise be touched, an adrenaline that watching or reading cannot provide. The buyers are not who you might imagine: teenagers, blue-collar workers, academics, celebrities who have acknowledged their collections openly. Most buyers stay quiet. They don't want to be judged. Which is interesting in itself. The purchase feels private, necessary somehow, and slightly shameful. In 2011, a Las Vegas gallery held a commercial exhibition of Gacy's work. Prices ranged from $2,000 to $12,000 per painting. The gallery announced that proceeds would be donated to a victims' organization. The National Center for Victims of Crime refused the donation. They sent a cease and desist letter. Dolores Nida's son, John Mori, was 19 when Gacy killed him, a Marine, studying to become an accountant. She was still speaking publicly about her son 30 years later, still trying to explain what it means to have a piece of your heart removed and never returned. John Mori has no paintings for sale. Here is a question worth sitting with. You are watching a documentary about John Wayne Gacy. You chose to. Something pulled at you. The clown, the paintings, the number 33, the question of how a man like this moves through a community like that for 6 years. Something made you curious enough to be here. That curiosity is not pathological. It is nearly universal. True crime is one of the most consumed categories of content on every platform that has ever measured it. But listen again to what the murderabilia buyer says: historical interest, psychological curiosity, proximity to something that cannot otherwise be touched. And consider what you are doing right now. The distance between watching and owning is real. It is a meaningful distinction. The painting generates revenue. This generates something else. But what that something is, and who it serves, and what we get from it, these are not comfortable questions. They are the right ones. The murderabilia market does not exist because of outliers. It exists because Gacy interests us. The market is where that interest becomes transactional, becomes visible, becomes something we can point at and call disturbing, while we keep watching. The painting cost $12,000. What does your attention cost? institutional failure. By 1972, when Gacy killed his first victim, the record was already in place. University of Iowa, 1968. Antisocial personality disorder, treatment unlikely to help, behavior likely to result in repeated conflict. Released after 18 months. Between 1972 and 1978, families filed missing persons reports. Young men disappeared from job sites, from the backs of cars, from brief encounters with a contractor who had offered them work. Investigations moved slowly, or not at all. The victims were young, male, working class. Some were perceived as gay. Some had histories that made them easy to categorize as runaways, as transients, as unreliable sources. The categories were not malicious. They were simply the categories available. On May 6, 1978, Gacy was photographed with First Lady Rosalind Carter at the Polish Constitution Day Parade in Chicago. He had directed the parade for 3 consecutive years. He wore a lapel pin, indicating he had been vetted and cleared by the Secret Service. She signed the photograph for him. "To John Gacy, best wishes, Rosalind Carter." At the time of the photograph, he had already committed most of his murders. The photograph is not evidence of a conspiracy. It is evidence of something more ordinary, that the systems we build to identify threat are calibrated to find the monster we imagine, not the one that exists. And the monster we imagine looks like something other than a parade director who raises money for sick children. Conclusion. Pogo smiles from canvases in private collections across the world. The smile is fixed. It has not changed since 1985. It cannot be read, and we keep buying it, not despite that, but because of it. The Uncanny Valley effect that makes clowns frightening is the same mechanism that makes them magnetic. We are drawn to what we cannot process. The unreadable face generates a compulsion to keep looking, keep analyzing, keep trying to find the person inside the paint. In this, the collector paying $12,000 and the community of Norwich, Illinois, in 1975, are performing the same cognitive operation, seeing the costume, not the person behind it. One cost $12,000 and a question about what kind of person you are. The other cost 33 lives. The difference is everything. The mechanism is identical. We do not know what Gacy felt when he painted. He said in one interview that his intention was to bring joy to people's lives. He wrote on the back of his canvases, "Enjoy the painting as much as I enjoyed doing it." Both statements may be sincere. Both may be performance. In a man assessed at a PCLR of 27, above average for criminal populations, below the clinical threshold for psychopathy, the distinction is not necessarily meaningful. Both can occupy the same mind without contradiction. What we do know is this: he painted up to 6 hours a day. He kept a logbook, meticulous, detailed, of every painting he made, who he sold it to, and for how much. The same precision he brought to the crawl space, the same system applied to a different kind of inventory. His last words, before the lethal injection took effect on May 10th, 1994, were 2 words, not an explanation, not an apology. "Kiss my ass." The paintings outlasted him by 30 years. They are still being sold. The woman across the street waved at Pogo from her front porch. The neighbor 3 doors down let her teenage son take summer work from PDM. The Democratic Party officials shook his hand at every parade and fundraiser and believed what they were shaking. The hand of a man who showed up, who organized, who got things done. He was not hiding behind the role. He was the role. The contractor ran a real company. The precinct captain did real organizing. The parade director showed up every year. There was no gap between the surface and the performance, because the performance had become the surface. That is what makes Norwood Park different from every simpler story about a monster in disguise. There was no disguise. There was a man who had constructed himself so completely from the outside, in that the outside was him. And beneath it, in the crawl space, 26 people who had trusted exactly what they were supposed to trust. We make that calculation every day, with every person whose surface we have never had reason to look beneath. In almost every case, the surface is the truth.